to be inclusive of us, right? Because frequently when folks think of higher ed, the bubble that pops up is faculty and students. And there's very little, I spend a lot of time demanding respect and dignity for the work that we do because it's frequently invisible. There's an expectation that you will have all the things that you need, that your students will be fed, they will be housed, the place will be clean, and everything else in between. And that you will, the students will have a path to graduation because they will intuit it on their own, right? The difficulty is that until they have guidance that is not always provided by every faculty member, they come to the office person, they come to who's available, the adult in the room, or who they perceive as the adult in the room, not always, sometimes I'm 12 and a half, so that type of guidance, that invisible work requires advocacy as a university community.
Rainah, how do you deal with these competing interests with your faculty and your unit saying, I want, usually there's a dynamic where there's push-pull between classified and faculty?
Definitely. So I, as stated, represent faculty and staff. Our unit is extremely faculty-driven, or local rather, and it becomes a challenge to get the classified staff, which is a small portion of the local itself, to have a voice. So I'll tell this quick story. When I started in union work, I started as a rep for my department, and then at some point got more involved. I was on the bargaining team last time, which was around 2019. We're currently bargaining right now, and then became a co-chair of the classified unit. So as a co-chair, you get to see kind of a different perspective of what happens because you are on the executive committee. Well, a lot of people after the last negotiations kind of dropped out and decided not to be union leaders because there was a whole lot of challenges going on just within the union. So there were spots open. There were people who retired, people who just didn't want to be leadership. So someone came and approached me and asked me if I wanted to be secretary. And I said, no, I don't. And I'm like, why are you asking me if I want to be secretary? Oh, I just thought that might be something. This was a faculty member who was in leadership. Oh, I just thought that might be something that you'd be interested in. I said, absolutely not, but I'm more than willing to run for president. Why shouldn't I be president? And it was just assumed because I work in the office, because it's, that clerical type job. And I said, I'm going to tell you why I don't want to be secretary, because I don't take minutes. I don't do notes well, and you're not going to get out of me what you need to get out of a secretary if you ask me to be secretary. So, but I'll run for president. And I did, and I've been president for the last 4 years. I've been the first, thank you. So it becomes where you have to assert yourself. There are classified staff who work at Community College Philadelphia who aren't teachers, who have bachelor's degrees, who have master's degrees, who have all types of things that people don't realize they do outside of their work. And just because they're working in the office or just because they're cleaning toilets does not mean they are not valuable in other areas. And you have to push and fight to make sure that the faculty, and no offense to any English faculty in the room, we're very English faculty heavy organization at my local, and they're very, very dominating, but they will listen, and you have to make sure as classified staff that you put them in the position to know, here's what we're going to do, here's what we're not going to do, here's how this is going to work, here's how this isn't going to work, and I'm going to have my seat at the table, because the table isn't just yours.
All right. Very fascinating, and congratulations on winning that role.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it took a coalition, I assume, to build that winning ticket. But so, Sarah, the same question. Do you primarily just represent classified, or is there push and pull also with faculty in your unit?
Well, I do. Like I said, I have, I actually, it's a state fed president. I'm over 138 autonomous locals, and they're all classified. But I think what people forget is classified are from nurses to HVAC to, special ed EAs to, when I was the president of the community college, before I became state fed president, I was in the finance office and did all the refunds and FAFSA. So to say there's not a competing interest when there are 4,000 different job titles would be a misnomer. So I think there's competing interests already. I think something that we have found post Janus is that there is not time to fight each other. There is only time to build together. And so I've really been able to find those relationships and build those relationships with faculty and with the teaching unions. We've just had a lot of parity and a lot of support.
Okay, so you build coalitions outside of your union with the faculty unit. I know sometimes the issues that come up are that impact classified. If you can get the faculty to go along with it, that helps, right?
Yeah, you definitely want faculty on board, especially since we see the students more often than faculty. We spend the most time. I know we're here to talk about higher ed, but let's talk about, medically fragile children are classified, are having to deal with things that people shouldn't have to deal with. We're talking about violence. Violence happens to faculty. Violence happens to classified. And so building a coalition between the teaching unions, the faculty unions, the confidential unions, the management, the board, the trustees, like there is a coalition to be built everywhere. And it's pretty handy when you're able to call in those cards.
Yeah. So in this area, any other comments from the panel on coalition building, kind of the parity between your classified and faculty? Anything else you want to add?
I just want to jump in. So at Rutgers, particularly through the pandemic, we formed a coalition of Rutgers unions. And that there are 21 unions at Rutgers, right? Some that are as small as 9 members, like the Doctors Council, I think only has 9, represent 9 folks. And the faculty union represents 9,000, right? That is inclusive of full-time faculty, non-tenure track faculty, part-time lecturers, and grad students, right? I think that encompasses and EOF counselors, right? So a lot of relationship building, which in turn built a lot of trust, right? So I don't have a problem calling my colleagues in other unions, right, to just one, like, is this something that's happening to you, or is this just happening to us, or is this, because having those relationships helps build change, right? Because if we can find small ways to collaborate and make, and face the common enemy, for a lack of a better word, to improve working conditions for all of us, we take as many opportunities as we can. It's about, I think it's about communication. It's about not being afraid to have that sometimes difficult conversation with someone that may not be experiencing the same, that issue in the same manner, or maybe part of the cause of the issue, which we're also trying to address from a different perspective, right? Before we take it to a grievance or a more formal process. It's an opportunity to have those conversations, and maybe it's preventative for the next time.
Okay.
We have recently discovered that many of the unions, the major unions in Philadelphia, are all bargaining contracts this year. So we have DC 33, DC 47, which are the white collar and blue collar Philadelphia city unions. We have Philadelphia Federation of Teachers, which is the school district. ourselves and a lot of other locals are bargaining contracts. So we've been in conversations with a lot of those different entities to bargain together. We also have a campaign for bargaining for the common good, and just recently had a rally last Tuesday, the day before the mayor. I don't know if you have heard, in Philadelphia, we recently got a new mayor, and she's the first female mayor. She's also a black female, and she's also the 100th mayor. And there's a lot happening in Philadelphia right now around the 250th anniversary of the country, we'll say, is going to be in 2 years. So 2026, so that's 250 years from 1776. So lots happening in Philadelphia. I mean, lots always happening in Philadelphia, but the mayor being a female and a black female is a big deal. There's a lot of eyes on her. And the one thing that they don't want is all of these unions going on strike. So we've been building coalitions with all these other unions to make sure that we are getting fairness in staffing, fairness in pay. We want a living wage. Just the conversation around being great and being effective for Philadelphia, because not only are Philadelphians going to school at all of these colleges, they're also, Temple, that's another one who's bargaining. But we want the city to be effective, but that also means that the people who work in and for the city need to be taken care of as well.
Okay, all right, all the contracts up at once. I wouldn't want to be on either side.
I would
Go
just,
ahead.
one last thing I think is important to remember is that coalitions are not built only during times of struggle. They are maintained through times of peace and solidarity, and you have to show up for your partners when they need you, and in order to maintain those relationships and actually have them show up for you.
Okay. I want to switch gears a little bit and get into some juicy stuff that my union, Classified, always brings to me. They say, look here, Mr. Administrator, you get to work from home when you want. I don't know what you're doing at home. And then they say, okay, Mr. Faculty, you come and go from the classroom. In a sense, that's a flexible schedule, right? So I've been pressed by my unit, my classified unit, to kind of develop a flexible schedule and build it even into their contract. Kind of pushed back, but I want to ask you all, has there been demands since COVID, even before COVID, to have flexible contracts for classified members? You know, the argument for management is that a lot of you are front facing, so how do we do it? So what has been your experience, Rainah, with flexible or work arrangements, telework, remote work, and dealing with the demands from your unit?
Great question. So when the administrators start talking about who's student facing, I say, well, aren't we all? Are we all here to deal with students? I mean, you may want to hide in your office if you want to, but we are all here to serve students, so we are all student facing. Since the pandemic, since the full shutdown, we were 100% remote. Then we went back to 50% remote. And then after that, there was a big push from the union to make sure that we maintained some remote work. So we have what we call our side agreements. And every semester, we go through this whole conversation about who's student facing, who's not, who can get this 4-day work week, who can do this, who can do that. What we are bargaining now is having it put in the contract so we can stop all this side agreement business. But we're back to that conversation of who's student facing and who's not. And so to be continued.
Okay, all right. So you're still working on it, kind of?
Still working on it.
Okay. Unions, your membership's demanding it?
Absolutely,
I take it. Okay.
yes.
All right, so back to you, Sarah, on the same question about flexible work. Have you had to deal with it, and how have you dealt with it?
I have. So during the pandemic, I was the local president of a community college in Southern Oregon, and obviously we all went remote. And we went remote thanks to classified workers who were able to flip it and put classes online and get internet and make sure everybody had all their things. And then when it was time to come back, there wasn't parity, there wasn't equity, it was classified or back. And it was a huge struggle to show that we were able to do our work. You trusted us for a year. You can continue to trust us to get our work done. And it became sometimes it's who has a better relationship with their manager. and that's also an icky feeling. And so we put it into the contract that there's an actual grievance where you can file, say, this is why, this is, what I think I can accomplish, how many days I think I can do it. And even with groundskeepers, even with people who you would think are unable to do their work from home, we all have classes we have to take. We all have all these, tests we have to do. We have all of these, different things. So there are still opportunities for everybody to have that occasionally. And so we were able to work that into our contract.
Okay, that's applaudable. How did you do that? I mean, but that seems like a lot of work because I probably wouldn't want to go for that. I guess it was give and take at the bargaining table.
It was not, I wouldn't say give and take. I would say it was demand and action.
All right.
I like that.
All right. So Christine, have you had to deal with flexible work arrangements and the issues surrounding it since COVID, or even before COVID? I think our people were wanting to demand that at another employer that I worked at.
So pre-COVID, in our previous contract, entering into COVID, we had telework in our contract. It was very limited, and it was only for exempt staff. And we tried to make the case when we brought that proposal forward in 2016 or 17, 18, that it was necessary and it was a good retention method to keep and attract better and different staff. Obviously, COVID took us all remote, and we proved that non-exempt staff were able to take advantage of it as well. Right? At first, when we were negotiating, there was this across the bargaining table, there was a lot of conversation about time theft. For some reason, people who they can steal time from, if you're an exempt employee, anybody who's an exempt employee and is not overtime eligible, I will say that you're having time stolen from you, as opposed to those who are overtime eligible that crafts a system that that you're compensated for stolen time, right? So we had to present it in a different frame, I think, and COVID helped do that, show that people don't traditionally, we don't steal time. We do our jobs. Additionally, when I talked about the coalition being a formalized group of unions that negotiated together, we deliberately put certain topics onto a coalition table. Remote work being one of them. Even though faculty were not the primary benefactors of a formal telework, remote work article in all of our contracts, they do have folks that need it, right? They have non-tenured faculty that are also directors, and they have a lot more flexibility, but nonetheless, it's important to have stuff in your contract so the university can be held accountable when as needed. So we were able to negotiate an actual article that expanded, that's like 8 pages long, I think, that expanded telework to everyone. It is the same article across 7 contracts. It includes our HPAE colleagues who are also AFT, but that represent nurses and professional staff. And on the medical school side, it includes our medical school faculty, it includes our full-time academic faculty, it includes our AFSCME colleagues, it includes our CWA colleagues, right? So it is broad, same language. Interpretation is going to be more difficult, right? Holding the university accountable. To address what someone said about student-facing, right? We are all student-facing, but there are times many of us have to physically be in the office, in the space. Like you can't, for my members who work in dining, it's very hard to feed our students when you're home. So we have no expectation that they will be remote. But we do have expectation that we can do a compressed work week for them, right? There can be other opportunities, an ad hoc schedule, right? Seasonal, when the students aren't here and there's fewer students to feed, then they should be able to remote work during those time periods, right? So that includes winter break, that includes spring break, and certainly over the summer when the primary work that they're doing is feeding our overnight camps and soccer camps and football camps and whomever other youngsters that come to avail themselves of the delicious food in the various dining halls. But it's not 7,000 meals in each dining hall a day. So there's opportunity for folks to do scheduling and order and procure from home, even if you work in the Department of Dining, right? So we were trying to be more creative in creating provisions that everyone could take advantage of, something that applied to everyone.
Okay, I think it's fascinating you have contractual language. So I wanted to turn it over to kind of give the audience a chance to participate. We have a lot of areas here we wanted to cover. So any questions on this whole flexible work week? I assume you all have faced these demands. Anybody else have? Yes.
Yeah, I'm from FIT, and FIT is part of SUNY. I'm the Director of Labor Relations, and we were able to negotiate a work from home day, 1 day a week for the classified staff. And we did a pilot a couple of times, and then we just put it into our contract this past January. So it's 1 day per week. And if there are all kinds of conditions worked in there. For example, the supervisor can pull back the day if there are work performance issues and so on. So there's that opportunity. We were able to work it out. It's very successful in terms of some of the positions. And of course, you have some positions where I see you were mentioning front-facing, and where we have people that are required to be on campus. Those were a little more challenging. So we're looking at that, but definitely there's an opportunity, and it is in our contract.
Okay, good. That's the first step for 1 day a week. So I think that's management, but I think it's everyone. I believe in flexible work, so I think if we can get it, it's a good thing if it's doable. Yes.
How do you kind of deal with this within your membership of like people wanting more flexibility than they feel like they're getting, and the kind of push and pull between what you're able to bargain for and what people are looking for in your membership?
Good question. So 1 day, is 1 day enough for your membership? Is how do you deal with that? That's a good question.
So for my folks, it's detailed as hybrid, right? And that could be 1 day. It's traditionally in our university 2 days, but it could be 4 days. It could be fully remote. It depends on your job duties, right? We have folks that work around the country as recruiters. They're fully remote. They were hired as fully remote. Don't tell me that they can't be fully remote because you created a new and exciting, aspect. Now, where we do struggle, I will say, is that if I have 2 offices in, I'm just going to use psychology, right? It's a big department. I have one office whose supervisor says you must be here 3 days a week physically, and there's no, we can't adapt that. And then we have another office that's in once a week, right? And those people that are in 3 times a week watch that person bounce in once a week, and they're a little resentful and they call, right? But then, rather than make it member against member, we have a conversation about what does your department do versus what does their department do. And it could be 2 drastically different things. You're just not aware because it's about proximity, right? It's not about job duties. And we got to bring it back to job duties. And then sometimes, not to offend anybody, but we do have unreasonable supervisors, color me shocked, but there are times where you just have a person who's unreasonable, And that person might need to be shown that there's contractual language that doesn't prohibit them from modifying their very hard stance, right? Simultaneously, we do have a grievance process. It's really more about procedure, not about the decision, right? In order to get it into our contract, we left a lot of managerial discretion in this, because I could tell you that I want fully remote, you have no obligation to give me fully remote, right? But there should be a conversation.
There should be. So, that's a good question. We got it down to, and I heard the 1 day a week. It's basically 1 day a week. However, when the administration was going back and forth on their side regarding how remote days were going to work, they reached out to all the VPs and their areas, and that's how it was decided which area was going to have how many days. So for the most part, it's 1 day a week. Some areas are ineligible. Some areas have the compressed work week. And then there's one department that everybody is pretty much jealous of that gets 2 days a week. And that's because their VP decided that they could have 2 days a week. And that's how it's been. Now, there is an argument that they don't get their work done when they're remote, but we can't really say what they do. And it's only because their department impacts so many other areas, and there's been a lot of complaining. But we did not get a lot of pushback from the members when it got down to just 1 day after having gone from full to half to 1 day. People were just like, okay, well, that's what it is. We get the 1 day, and they deal with it. Some people don't even like working remote because they say, I'm not using my resources to work. I'm going to come to work and use theirs. But for the members, they seem fine with it. They're not complaining, and they will complain, as I'm sure everyone knows. But they're good 1 day, and even those who don't have a day, they haven't complained either.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Yes.
Quick question on your comment about groundskeepers, like everyone can find a way to work from home. How do you deal with the laborers and the groundskeepers and people that you know need to be on campus for physical duties, I should say?
Right, and so I think it goes back to even like the dining hall, right, where, so groundskeepers spend a lot of time planning at what point they have to put out pesticides, at what point they have to do planting, at what point they have to do this, and they have to order things. Machines need to be repaired. And so it's not going to be 1 day a week. It's not. But it is going to be available so that if we have to take our annual, 72 hours of training, they can do that from home, right? It's summertime, so they could come in really early, like Christine was saying, a compressed schedule, so that they avoid the majority of the heat in the day. So things like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the concept of the vice president or vice chancellor deciding is what we adopted at our community college. And then there was also, as Rainah talked about, a list of folks that we did not deem appropriate to have remote work. But you're giving me some ideas, Sarah. I mean, the training that we
I'm like over here twitching.
Yeah.
I'm glad you decided it wasn't appropriate.
I
So
left that one too. That was a
we haven't
big.
encountered this group yet where we have to bargain it. But our group is pretty adamant that they want this. So last contract, it didn't get there. I think it's going to get there eventually. But the whole idea of addressing those folks that really are on the ground and the jealousies that arise. I get the complaints to me, and I'm like, you got to talk to your union. But then it comes back to me because, of course, the vice chancellors have decided in one area these workers will have 2 days, in another area they'll have 1 day, and then they start saying they're the same types of workers. So it's an issue that we need to address. And as I said, I believe in remote work because I think it gives you a chance to have work-life balance because some of us, you can work from home, you're not doing a commute, you're not stressed out like getting here in the morning just for this conference. So I get it. So we can move on to another area. And I'll just ask you all like kind of one or two questions in this area. There's been a rumor, I'll say from management side, that management hasn't been backfilling a lot of positions when there's been promotions, retirements, and resignations. How have you all dealt with that from a union perspective? So the college is letting these people go, but it appears we're not backfilling. And you call me and say, hey, we're going to backfill this. And I call my manager and she says, no, at this time I don't think there's a need because the department says there's not a need. But you all are hearing different. So how do you deal with that? Where it appears, or maybe you have evidence that they're not backfilling these positions that should probably be backfilled, some of them. And you're looking at me.
I'm like, do you want me to answer that?
Yes.
I mean, who are you calling on?
Yes, go ahead and answer, Sarah.
Sorry, I don't mean to scare you. Like, we had fun at dinner last night. It's fine. We're good. We're friends.
We are friends.
So I think it becomes a discipline and a job duty issue. I think we set people up to fail when we do not fill positions and put the work on other people. And then when we finally do bring those people in, they're like, these people are so great. Look, they do so much a better job than you. And you're like, because they do a third of the work, damn it. So I think it's about having data, and it's about having, quite honestly, experience on the ground and having those stories told. I know we haven't gotten there yet, but at my community college, we are lucky enough to have a labor management team that meets once a month. And we have a section called Roundtable Rumors. And so we spend, there's 6 managers, 6 union, and we spend 4 hours every month going over stuff and building relationships and building trust. And that's where we bring our problems. That's where we solve them. And so if I'm finding that departments aren't filling, sometimes those managers, they become part of the management team at the labor table and get to hear the real problems. Or HR goes to them and says, you have all these disciplinary issues because you aren't filling positions, right? And so it's about having that relationship and that trust as well with HR. Which I think a lot of people, I have felt pushback from other union leaders that don't want that relationship, and I think it's necessary to have that sort of relationship where you can sit down and have a real conversation.
Okay, that's a good response. So, Christine, have you had instances where positions aren't being backfilled and it kind of stressing your membership?
Yes, retention and recruitment are 2 of the HR buzzwords that I throw at them frequently because, as you said, attrition has happened. And, people who are eligible to retire during COVID took the opportunity to retire, and I applaud them for it. But the university did not go through great strides to replace folks. Departments have kind of collapsed into other departments, and there's an expectation that my folks will now support 2 departments. So if you originally supported, say, 10 faculty members and, a reasonable sized department, not a giant department, and now they collapsed them, and now you're responsible for somehow 30 faculty members, 30 tenured faculty members, and an additional 30 part-time lecturers, or lecturers as they are now called in our university, right? That's a lot more responsibility. So contractually, how we try to address it, we wanted more processes to address volume. They said no thank you. In the kindest of ways.
Management?
Yes, management. They.
Yeah.
AKA they.
I said they.
But we have both a self-initiated reclassification process that some of the criteria include knowledge, autonomy, problem solving. right? And I have a tendency to recommend and encourage our members if you are seeking a reclassification, frame all your volume using the criteria that they're using to evaluate your potential reclassification. We also have a new piloted, we always had an in-grade procedure that was management initiated, right? That essentially you weren't eligible for a promotion, but because of greater scope and depth and impact on the department, organization, yada yada, you are eligible for an in-grade. So once again, taking volume and reframing it to the criteria to be successful in that modification of your job. Does that make sense? Right? So if they're not going to say, now you have 50 faculty and 5,000 students, and this is particularly in some like I have student counselors that started in a department that served 500, right? And that was a manageable load of students that you were supposed to move towards graduation through, through 125 a year, right, in every year. Some of those in our business school, it has exploded to about 2,000 students per counselor. They've hired a few more counselors, but that volume of students is still, that's the caseload now. Now, I tell my folks, you have to put mechanisms into place in order to serve 500 or to serve 2,000 like you served 500 in the past. Describe those mechanisms, right? You created, you manage, right? Use those power verbs to describe your impact on this organization. Because honestly, those 2,000 kids would know if you weren't doing your job. Right? Their parents would call.
Rainah, okay, go ahead.
Yes. These conversations always make you realize that no matter where you are in the country, we're all having similar problems. Since the pandemic, we've lost, in the classified unit alone, about 25% of our staff, and they are not filling those positions. The argument has been going on since we all came back to work, for the most part, in full, wondering where these people are, and they would say, well, we don't need them, or we're not going to fill those positions, or we're evaluating. That's the one I love the most. We're evaluating where we may need to put the most effort into as far as staffing is concerned. Yet, we have this division of work that just keeps going and going and going to the people who are there, who are getting more frustrated. They're already underpaid. They're already overworked. They're already being used in a way that isn't fair to anyone, and they're frustrated. And then more people leave. The fact that we don't receive a living wage makes people look at other jobs. The fact that we only get 1 day of remote work makes people look at other jobs, because there are jobs out there that are fully or half remote. And if in my college in particular, and I'm sure in many of other places where all of us work, if we are not pushing the administration to make sure, let me add this too, I call at Community College of Philadelphia the Administrator of the Week, because every week we get a new email that says, welcome to so-and-so and such, and their role in this place, administrator, coordinator, manager, director, all of these things, VP of such and so-and-so. And I think I was who was I just talking to about the special assistants that keep showing up for all of these VPs. I'm like, well, how many assistants do they need? And they're not classified assistants. They are administrator assistant roles. So it's an interesting position to be in when you're watching this decline of a certain group of people And the work hasn't changed. In fact, it's gotten greater. As far as the pushback, we just this past Friday sat at the table and laid out our entire staffing proposal at the bargaining table. They did not reject it, but we'll see what happens next week when we come back and hear what they have to say, because it always takes them a week to think about what we said or what we gave them. So at least a week. So we'll see what happens. I don't expect that they're going to be opening more positions, but the argument has always been, well, you know, the work has changed since the pandemic, or the processes have changed since the pandemic. There's always this blame on the pandemic. And I said one day, well, if it's the pandemic that is causing the work to change, the work hasn't changed for the people who are doing it. So what are you going to do? It's
Just more of it.
I want to say two things. During the pandemic or after the pandemic, FTE went down, right? So we do it by FTE. I think most of us do, like FTE is down. But that's because everybody's taking part-time. So now we have twice the amount of students, but less FTE. Like, we are still dealing with twice the amount of students. We're still doing the records for twice the amount of students, the financial aid and all the collections, like all this stuff. Like, we are still having to deal with that. And so that is, you know, something that I, as the president of a community college local, I got to go to the board every single month, and I would very freely, with my 10 minutes, let them know exactly what I thought. And it was even better on Zoom because you could have lots of people there with you. And don't be afraid of the media. Media is your friend. You're drowning, call a friend in the paper, because they're always at the board meetings.
I see who not to mess with. But anyway, yeah, that's a tough approach.
There's a question in the back.
Oh, there's a question, yes.
Yes, I wanted to know if you've had the experience of unfilled, the funding set aside for unfilled positions being used to fill budget gaps.
It was actually, that was a note that I had. Layoffs being offset by unfilled positions. And they're like, oh, we're cutting the budget, but we're not impacting anyone's employment because we're just not going to fill these positions. Absolutely, that's happening everywhere. And what we see happen is about 6 months later, that department is in trouble. And they're rushing to hire those people again. And so that's my experience. And if you get, quite honestly, if you get administrators who have been around long enough and they've seen this cycle, they stop doing it.
Yes.
On this topic, have any of you tried to pursue this is pre-COVID, and people fought to maintain it during post-COVID, the solution that the nurses union was successful in getting in California, which was a dual path for workload. They fought to get it in the contract to restrict, in the case of nurses, how many patients, this is the parallel, right? How many patients per, and of course it varied by department and by the particularities of the situation in the hospital, and also workload vis-a-vis assignment, so that people couldn't be forcibly assigned to something that they hadn't done since they were in school, right? I mean, an ER nurse being forced to do, neonate, and they pursued that both contractually and in the legislature, on the basis that, just as faculty say our working conditions are students' learning conditions, that our working conditions are patients' healthcare conditions, right? And I think all of us that are involved in service stuff in and around education, can say the same thing with slightly different tweaked words. And they were ultimately, now this is a decade-long struggle, right? But they were ultimately successful on both those tracks, which now reinforce each other, both the contract and the state law. And I know that other nurses and healthcare unions have tried to emulate this in other states in the years since. And they've had to fight and strike to maintain this, right? And also be very active politically to maintain the state law. But I'm curious, have any of you pursued, you know, that kind of a strategy, either you know, wholesale contractual limits or legislative avenue for that workload limit, which is parallel to class size for teachers.
Yeah, so he raises a great question. Have any of you addressed it in the sense of having bargained K-12, you have class limits, you know, work assignment limits? Have you all thought about that or gone in that direction?
We've thought about it.
Yes.
And, you know, I would love to say that we're able to get class limits. But to be quite honest, I have special education EAs in K-12 who are sitting in a classroom with 7 or 8 very unstructured children. And they should be 2-on-1, right? 2 adults to 1 child, and it's 1-on-8. Recruitment and retention for positions like that are difficult. The training is not happening. I sit on a task force. I was really fortunate last year to help craft some staffing language around special education where you get 5 hours minimum because people were getting 2.5, 3, right? So they couldn't get benefits. And so those are things that are important, you know, an increase in wages so that people who do these harder jobs. But for higher education, proving that there's a class size load would be really difficult.
Christine, any comment on that? Comparing your group to nurses and...
So we don't have a ratio. We don't have a strict ratio. I do represent some folks that also work in schools that have autistic adults or autistic children, right? Those ratios are guided by law. They do mostly follow those guidelines because funding. Not because of us, because of funding. Okay, they don't want their funding pulled. It is something to consider, Joe. But the difficulty is that, and just to be transparent, like you could be a staff person in a department that has 3 faculty members, and one is incredibly needy. Right?
No.
Or you could be in a department with 30 and they're all independent and they just give you paperwork for processing. Right? So if you need to hold the hand of somebody, so it's not always as clear as this, there's a magic number, as opposed for nurses, like patient care is a little different, I think, because someone's life is in balance and is a little bit it's a little bit sexier when you take that out into the public, right?
Immediate life and death.
But saying that, you know, I have this person that needs their reimbursement because they went to Greece for their research immediately becomes a less urgent thing for the papers to perhaps pick up, right? for anybody who gets that reference.
The Greece reimbursement might tell the story.
No, it's research, man.
There's a number.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Can I come?
Right.
Wait, no, I'm curious as to what was the rationale, like, because of what the reason So the employee, what was the issue? The employees being asked to go above and beyond for something personal that's not really a high priority, right?
I have, we've had folks that ask us to write their thank you notes for their daughter's like bridal shower, and I'm kind of like, honey, please don't do that. And I don't say honey, but I'm thinking in my head like, you're my kid. I need, because we have research faculty, and if you are traveling on research, for a research project, you have every right to bring forward all your receipts, whether it's on a scrap of on a napkin, which is not submittable anymore per the university's rules, not ours, right? But there are some folks that are aggressively demanding, right? And that is not determined by the number of people sometimes. I mean, one person can for anybody who's a parent in the room, you can have one kid, one child that takes up your entire life. And then you can have 10 kids that they're invisible because you hid them in the basement. But you know what I mean? Like there's disproportionate. Nobody knows what you mean. There's disproportionate demands on your attention.
Yes.
And it's not always as clear cut as numbers.
Yeah. Sorry for interrupting
Do
you,
we-
by the way.
okay.
Oh, there's two.
We have a-
Okay, I'll get to yours next.
My name's Ken Gallant. I'm with the Oregon Education Association.
Woo! Yeah, Reed and I hang out all the time.
Oh, cool. Well, she likes me, so that's cool. I wanted to mention 3 things, and you can chat with me about this or get my email, because I want to tell you about a success story where, and it doesn't involve blood or guts or anything. In my past assignment, I work with community colleges, South-Oregon right now. My past assignment, I represented 1,000 education support professionals, classified employees in Lebanon, Oregon, and Albany, Oregon. In Lebanon, Oregon, they had this massive attrition due to pandemic, other types of things, but they were losing 35% of their classified staff from one year to the next.
Wow.
And so I wanted to just tell you briefly, it's a big story, but it's a unique one because it's a shared value thing of what we express to the school district about their problem. They believe and had contact with the solutions we provided, and there are 3 of them. The first one we did was a mentoring program. So every new employee who came into the Lebanon Community School District would have a mentor, hopefully in their job category and with a low ratio.
Is this
Meaning if I have a new
contractual?
employee coming to somebody, I have somebody I can go to, I can talk about how is it that, where do you find this in the department, where do you do this? And it lasted for a year, and you had to do it as an employee. So it created this contact on the management side, so it's like, hey, we got somebody for them to tag along with. On the union side, it's just, hey, we're helping administer the program, and we're talking, like, workers just talking to workers, so that's awesome. The other piece we did is we wanted to raise the idea of the professionalism is a complicated term, I'll just say that, but the idea of professionalism for education support professionals. We have a professional development program within NEA, the national. I never really worked with the national, but they had professional development that was ranked professional development by 12 job categories. So like if you were a custodian, you did this, you did that, you could like a teacher kind of go up and rank professional development. We talked to the district and say, hey, this high level stuff, we showed it to them, had a presentation, they're like, yeah, it's pretty cheap. So they decided to pay somebody who did one of these credentials $150 for completing it. So the employee put in some hours, the professional development was kind of taken care of, it was high quality, and it created another earnings opportunity for the employee. Mentors and mentees were both paid, by the way. So if it was after hours, that was bonus, or it could be overtime. So it was a program to have this contact. The final piece we did in this one, we condensed the school district, because they really believed in what we were talking about. They found out on the loss of employees costing like $10,000 an employee. If they lost somebody, it cost them $10,000. Retraining, all this type of program. So we were able to show them, hey, your bottom line, say with the mentoring program, Last piece we did, and this one was a no-brainer, but we had to explain to everybody and tell everybody it was going to be okay. The salary schedule for them was 35 steps.
What?
For all those cringing, I know you deal with it. It was 35 steps.
You can't even retire?
We got it down to 8 steps. So we scrunched the whole salary schedule. Everybody had a guaranteed raise for 2 years. So for me, these combination of these factors, over 3 years, the earnings went up over 25% by some of these movements. So what I'm saying about these is I've had those fights and I've had cooperative relationships with employers, and matters what the situation is. But this was really good because there were some fundamental things I just tapped into that was saving the boss money, and it was building the union. So I'm like,
Thank you, Ken.
yeah.
Get their bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, so it's unique in that sense. But the bottom line question, you can go a long way with bottom line question with a lot of people. So, anyways.
I have to ask you, I know the salary schedule is
Yeah.
contractual, but the mentoring program and the professional development, did you build that into the contract? Was that a side agreement? How was that formalized?
Thank you. Professional development's in the contract. Mentoring for reasons that were strategic on the union side and management that were recognized for board approval. We have that under memorandum. But we did a presentation in front of the board. Hey, boss, you can save all this money. You can have all those friendly faces. You can keep seeing the friendly faces. We're gonna do the work. And we had some minor grant money and seed proposal from NEA, the national union started off, and then the school board liked it, so they're like, well, we kind of believed it. They believed us enough and said, that sounds pretty good, so it's still running. The mentoring program is the national model, and it's been featured in magazine 11 in Oregon. But if any of these ideas you think it could work, or you want to find out more about it, I have my card, because for me it's like, I haven't had too many stories like this one. It's like, I haven't had too many stories like this one.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. I think administration usually is not opposed to, first of all, 35 steps are too many. Second, professional development is needed, even though a lot of us fight against it, and mentoring is great. I wanted to come back over here with a question.
I know the college, Poplar College, San Diego, Wofford, and so for our district, our faculty staff have investment, I think about 25% as well. And we did the calculations, right, about how much we've saved the district, and we have a huge unspent balance. We're heading towards another big one. The whole question of like, how much super reserve do you want? Like all of this stuff, we're asking. They haven't prioritized classified equipment because they made a decision, like it was, to not hire classified, especially those that are like directly working in instruction and like supporting the faculty and students, right? So it's been crazy to cut too much to the bone, but so we're kind of all in the same boat, and it's not like refreshing to hear, but it's good to be in solidarity that we're all like, fighting the same battle. But to talk about legislation, I'm also on our state affiliate CFT. I'm in the legislation council. And so we got to set the agenda for
Each 21st.
Yes, and so one of the cool things, like I'm brand new, I'm the only classified woman of color there, and there's actually only 2 classified people, the president of the CFT, and who is black, and me. So we're kind of the only people of color on the but one of the things that is great is that our faculty, like not just at Poplar, but I think in our CFT, have supported classified in a way where they are looking at items to the legislative agenda, because a lot of it is like bartering, right? Like what do we really want to fight? What do we have the chance of getting through appropriations? So we started this thing like 3 years ago where we're calling it a con, but because California has a bond, which is a faculty obligation number. So we want a classified obligation number. We're gonna, and so we put that on the legislative agenda. But little by little, it's gotten kind of right now it's stuck in appropriations, and it's only for K-12, which we're okay with, even though we're higher education. We know that when something happens for K-12, eventually it'll come up. right? For K through 12, it's easier to come up with like a number, right, of like efficiency number. And so that's why they cut out like the classified and at the higher, and because of that stuff, like, well, you only have 3 bosses, and like somebody else has 17 bosses. So like how do we, welcome to the that sort of thing. So but I think that you were right. I think we have to do legislation and contract, and obviously our district they have no interest at all in like talking about the fact that just because you're saying that enrollment is down, we still have to mow the grass, and we still have to maintain all of our buildings. We still have to schedule all the classes, right? Like we still need to have a disability resource center, no matter that's fully functioning. So it's kind of like when you tell us well, why do you want more people? Enrollment is down. We're like, but we're not teaching, we're not, and so it's just, it's a battle, and I guess I don't know.
No, that's good. It definitely is a pattern, but, and I'm admitting that is something that's out there.
I'll say in Oregon, just last year, we had some huge final wins, and I wouldn't say they were new wins. We've been fighting for things for 40 years. We got unemployment for classified for the first time. We're the only state in the nation that has unemployment for classified. So during the summer, you do not have to do reasonable insurance. You can get unemployment. So that was huge. We've been working on that for a long time. We got just cause for classified. Okay, when you're hiring, you get just cause. That shit is good. The school board does not like it, let me tell you. They are a little frustrated that it actually includes their confidential employees as well. More power. We were able to get a number of other things, seats on boards and commissions. We were able to do all of these other things, and those are all things that you get with continued power. And I love the fact that CFT is really leaning into classified. I know that May 21st is your guys' legislative day in Oregon. I am over the largest classified union nationally. It's an independent, right? And independent, I we affiliated with AFT in 2008, but there's still our little long talking thing. It's a thing that we do. We have always done. We have legislative education day, and we bring in, classified from OEA. We bring in classified from AFT Oregon. We bring, to our legislative so that we can build power together. And so it's really great to hear that you guys are building power together. Don't give up the fight, because what you start today, maybe someone's children will finish in 40 years.
Sponsor over at Michigan Education Association, so I kind of want to bring us back to loss of jobs, not filling of positions. How much of that are you seeing the work shifted to an exempt employee or a student?
Christine, did you want to start?
So exempt employees, there are more positions that are being hired as exempt. Okay, so the conversion, so they will prefer to pay you at a higher grade and create the position, posting the position as an exempt position. So they start out paying you maybe, $5 to $7 grand more, but they're gonna work you 40 grand. All right, so that's one strategy that management has, that we've seen. What we've been doing a lot more of is member education. You're hired at a work week, right? An FLSA work week, whether you're exempt or not exempt. Ours happens to be 37 and a half or 40 hours a week, right? we've been asking folks, our exempt and non-exempt, to keep track of, which I'm terrible at, of their job and their time, right? And include the time it takes for you to keep track, right? Because that extra 15 minutes or 20 minutes in the day counts as work time as well. And when we can demonstrate that there is a pattern of your being taken advantage of, there's an opportunity for us to go in for our exempt staff and call it an excessive workload, right? Because that's exactly what it is, and there are mechanisms in our contract to correct it, an excessive workload, including removing some of those duties, and I get to make, I encourage my members to make the recommendation of what they want removed. Like, don't remove everything, because that's not gonna work, because you just removed yourself out of the job. That's not the smartest thing to do, right? But remove some duties. Additionally, they can hire. And we don't always hire just students. What we have seen, now this is a trend, and I don't know if this is happening across the country, we have seen a lot more hiring of temporary agents, employees, right? And I'm trying to strategically get to a place that I don't let anybody on part, right? Because I think that it's difficult when I know, when our university will say that they are predicting a doom and gloom budget that includes fiscal austerity, and they're paying a temporary agency twice as much for the same employee that they would pay for us because they contracted with a temporary agency. That makes sense. And that person has no benefits, and what I talked about, they're not eligible for public loan forgiveness, right? Service loan forgiveness. They don't get benefits through the university. They get no retirement through the university. So there's a number of benefits that they don't accrue because they're not true employees. Now, New Jersey has this other problem that we're also trying to figure out legislatively how to approach. Our fringe rate at Rutgers is 70%, 71.2% currently. So every job that's posted requires an additional 71% budgeted in order to fill that position. So in some ways, when you're looking at the black and white, right, when our fabulous controller is just looking at the spreadsheet, it is cheaper to go to a temp agency because they're completely at-will employees. Right? They don't work out, they don't work out. You don't have pesky things like just pause that you gotta manage, right? So, not to answer your question, to in a circle around your question, but yes, we're seeing some of that work being converted to exempt employees, but we're also teaching our exempt employees ways to push back.
So that's fast. Before we answer this next question, did you want to comment on this at all, Rainah?
Sure. So we don't see a lot of work going to the students, just by the way the school is set up. Now, like I said earlier, we do have our administrator of the week program happening. However, we don't see a lot of the work that belongs to those classified positions that have been not filled going to those administrators. What ends up happening is us trying to figure out what those administrators are doing because there are so many. Now, as far as the work that belonged to the classified employees, that positions weren't filled, we do find a lot of situations where there may be classified employees who are still there working out of grade. And then that becomes the situation where we have to train your members, right? As you said, teaching them to look for where they're doing different work, and if that work, who was doing that work before it was handed to them. So we end up fighting a lot of out-of-grade battles with people. I just recently won an out-of-grade battle after 2 years of trying to figure out why I was doing this work that in another office is actually done by an administrator. Yet in my office it's done by me. And I'm like, this is the same work. And you're not paying me as an administrator, you're not paying me out of grade. At the very least, you could upgrade me. 2 years it took me for them to figure out after some consulting and it was a big mess. And we're finding this happening all over college. So we're trying to figure out now, and then we have this integrated job matrix. So if you read it, across the board, so you're going from administrative associate to administrative assistant to office administrative associate A and B. And it's like the lines between each of those positions are so fine. Or we have like a housekeeper A and a housekeeping person and a custodian. We're like, so what's the difference between all these jobs? It doesn't make sense. We're trying to figure out now, at some point during this negotiation process, one, salary schedules that make sense, and two, figuring out this job matrix so that we can clearly define, because roles have changed so much over the years, and people are doing so many different things across the board, what makes sense as far as job titling, the job matrix, and the distribution part.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Helen Worthen. I'm very involved in Higher Education Labor United, and I wish faculty had swarmed into this workshop. I don't want to start listing the number of things that faculty could learn from listening to the way you guys talk. And in the faculty workshops, we tended to focus on contract language. You're focusing on strategy and the fight. That's where faculty need to be. I would like you to have heard the words Higher Education Labor United, which is a coalition of local organizations, bottom up around the country. Our motto is wall to wall and coast to coast. Wall to wall means all the job categories that you've listed, and there's some that I hadn't thought of. And Higher Education Labor United needs you. Please be tolerant and give us a consideration. And we'll come around and try to get you to join.
Well, I want to say thank you for saying that. I will say that we sort of have a joke. It's a very out loud joke. It's not a quiet one. That when we're going around and introducing ourselves, it's I'm faculty, so when we think of a problem, we get the blue book out, we write it, we do all this stuff, and while you guys are doing that, Classified has already fixed the damn problem, and we have moved on, right? Like we work it, we fix it, and you're right, we are action. So thank you for
It was so obvious.
And I'll add, we're being recorded, so feel free to share the link when it goes up.
We recognize that 2 of the 3 organizations have already joined Higher Ed Labor United, the Rutgers unions and 2026, which I'm a former member of. So I want to say that out loud. And we hope OSCA.
I don't think you knew who OSCA was before today.
Pardon me?
Did you know OSCA before today?
Did I know?
Had you heard of
Oregon State Education Association.
Oregon School Employees Association?
Yeah, have I heard of them?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. I was a K-12 teacher for many years, and I was a classified employee in K-12 as well. So I knew you existed.
So we're down to the last 5 minutes, and one area that we did want to cover was, you all keep saying I'm they.
I'll live around there. One of us.
They are looking to build coalitions with Classified also. As a matter of fact, I value my Classified unit. I had a conversation with the president of our local last night about an issue that we're having. And I value the Classified unit. So how are you all building, either contractually, otherwise? We got these external agencies, coalitions, and we only have like a couple minutes. Coalitions with, your other bargaining units or building processes that help you to facilitate collaboration. I mean, how are you doing that? Because to be referred to as they, I'm on the same team. Are there contractual provisions out there that you all have, or how do you go about that?
I want to say one of my best mentors when I first started being a labor leader was actually the person who sat across from me in management. That was actually the person I learned the most from, who gave me the most confidence to walk in there as an equal. And between him and a labor leader, like that truly was for me. There is not a separation for me. So many times you find that classified or faculty move up into management, and you need to follow those relationships and build those relationships. And I'll also say, throughout Oregon and the nation, there are large swaths of groups that build coalitions and continue those. And I think it truly is, especially after post-Janus, I said it before, I'll say it again, we can't fight within each other. We have to build each other up. Like, we can fight other people. And I think that goes for everybody at an organization, from management to confidential to faculty to classified and to student government, right? Like, we are all in this together, and we have to make this happen. And so it's just about remembering who our opponent is, and that is truly the budget and how to fix it.
Okay. So Sarah, Christine, and Rainah, I really appreciate you all serving and really expounding your knowledge in this area. Looks like we do have a bunch of classified folks here. I know I'm down to 1 minute, so I don't want to ask you all another question unless there's other questions from the audience, comments. I really appreciate serving on this panel with you. And we appreciate you all being actively involved. Some of these panels have not been, and I appreciate you all asking these questions. And it shows the fire and the energy of the classified units. My unit is just as fiery. But it's a spirit, right? It's a spirit. You need this, right?
Yes.
Management needs to be checked sometimes, right? And then sometimes management needs to say, well, we don't agree. But overall, we're all trying to serve students, right? So overall, I think it was great. I appreciate you all, and great comments from you.
Well, thank you, Andre.
Thank you, Andre.
Can I request for the evaluations that the National Center has been asked in the past by various forces to expand its kin, like the directory of contracts and bargaining agents, to include staff unions, not just faculty and grad unions. And if everybody in this room, and the others from your organizations who are at the conference, would put on your evaluation forms for this conference that you'll get on the email, that the National Center for the Study of Collective Bargaining and Higher Education should be thinking about trying to expand its kin to include, staff unions. That would be a real useful contribution to the building of a higher ed labor movement that can deal with some of the national big issues that are confronting us, and that we don't have that kind of information as split up into 13 different unions in higher ed as we are now.
Which I think is deliberate and strategic on someone's wizard behind the curtain.
In San Diego, Carl says hello.
All right, thank you all. I think we're
Thank you, Wiley.
Thank you, Violet. And Noel.